Well, hi there! If you're familiar with what we do here on Clint's Reptiles, then you probably know that movie reviews are not something that we regularly do. We're much more focused on introducing you to the incredible diversity of the animal world. But late last year, I made my case for why my favorite movie, Jurassic Park, has only one legitimate sequel. And in that video, I mentioned that it is my opinion that the prequel trilogy of Star Wars falls flat. And that Empire Strikes Back is one of the few movies that rivals Jurassic Park as potentially being my favorite movie of all time. And there was definitely considerable interest in my opinions on Star Wars, especially the prequels, as many people do genuinely enjoy them. But it is my opinion that there are only 4 legitimate Star Wars movies. As for the others, it would be better if they didn't exist at all. And I'm gonna start with the lowest hanging fruit of the franchise, the sequels, as it won't take long to understand why they have to go. And then I will get to the prequel trilogy, and which 4 movies I think belong as official Star Wars canon. There is much wrong with the train wreck that were the Star Wars sequels. Though in many ways, Episode 7 was not a bad movie. It set up a number of really interesting characters and situations that I was very excited to see develop. The First Order were genuinely terrifying villains. They seemed efficient, ruthless, and uncompromising in a way that even the Empire didn't really rival. Snoke was a really interesting, mysterious power behind it all. As scary as the villains were that we knew, we also knew that something far more powerful and terrifying was coming in future installments. Kylo Ren was a really engaging character. It was fascinating to see a dark side Force user battling through the same struggles of committing completely to one side of the Force as Luke had gone through committing himself to the light side. And Captain Phasma was yet another seemingly significant villain that would likely be quite important in future films. Rey's mysterious backstory and apparent connection to the Force left us with many questions that we were excited to see answered. It was nice to get a view into the life of a stormtrooper and to the possibility that there might be defectors. But as it turns out, when you create a trilogy like a game of telephone, the following movie can just take all of that great setup and unceremoniously discard all of it, leaving a 3rd chapter with a huge mess to clean up, and that's what we got. And I'm not saying that Episode 7 was a good sequel either. It's not the 4th film that I think belongs. Because while it was a decent movie, it was a bad sequel. It was a bad sequel because it violated my minimum standard of an acceptable sequel or prequel. It cannot make you like the original less. And if you accept that Episode 7 is what followed The Return of the Jedi, then the entire original trilogy becomes so much worse. Han, Leia, Luke, Chewie, R2, C-3PO, Lando, Obi-Wan, Yoda, Biggs, Wedge, Dak, Mon Mothma, Admiral Akbar, Anakin Skywalker, and so many other characters fought and in many cases died to put an end to the oppressive empire that had ruled the galaxy since the fall of the Republic and that now possessed the ability to destroy entire planets, including Alderaan, one of the most wonderful places that you can imagine. I had a book about Star Wars planets as a kid, and reading about how wonderful Alderaan was filled me with rage and sadness. What was all that sacrifice for? Apparently nothing, because the next look we get at the galaxy after the fall of the Empire, the New Republic has already fallen, and the galaxy is ruled by a force possibly even worse than the Empire, with an even more dangerous planet-destroying weapon. So the big picture point of the movies, that had failed. But what about the individual character development? Well, I would say that of the characters that survived the original trilogy, the 2 that had the most important character arcs were Luke and Han. Luke had gone from being a whiny, immature kid on a remote, insignificant planet to being a powerful and capable Jedi Knight who played a significant role in bringing it into the Empire. And Han had gone from being an arrogant, self-centered smuggler to being a great general in the rebellion, and who eventually won the affection of the princess. Really great books were written about the family that Han and Leia would go on to have. And while the New Republic might not stand forever, their love surely would. Or not. Maybe by the next time we see them, their only child has turned into one of the greatest villains in the galaxy. Han has abandoned Leia and all of his responsibilities, and has returned to being the same good-for-nothing smuggler that he was when we met him. But at least Luke is there to pick up the slack, right? Nope. He was apparently just one failure away from giving up on life and becoming a hermit on another remote, insignificant planet, but this time with a lot more water. So at least he probably hadn't returned to moisture farming. In other words, by the beginning of this movie, everything important that was accomplished in the original trilogy had been completely and unceremoniously undone. So it serves it right that Episode 8 returned the favor. If there was one thing that Moana 2 did right, which I think is probably the only thing that it did do right, it was that at the start of that movie, it was apparent that since we had last seen our characters, everything had been amazing. What they'd accomplished in the first movie had mattered. And now, for the first time since then, something might be going wrong. And that is why we have another story to tell. Of course, nothing else about that movie was good. The story didn't need to be told. The new characters that seemed like they were going to be important never were. And the music was, let's just say it made me appreciate Lin-Manuel Miranda even more than I already did. It was a terrible movie, but not a bad sequel. Nothing about it made me like the original less. In a nutshell, Star Wars is clearly better if episodes 7, 8, and 9 don't exist. And so they don't. Let us henceforth refer to them as what they are. Legends. Legends told by exiled Imperial officers about how they hope things are going with the New Republic, which is indeed flourishing with Han and Leia building a wonderful family and showing great leadership together as Luke establishes his Jedi Academy and raises his own family with his wife Mara Jade. I know that Disney had a hard time coming up with a good story to tell in this sequel trilogy. It's just too bad they didn't have legions of excellent books written over decades to draw from. Just a shame. But now it is time to move on to my more controversial take, that the prequel trilogy fell flat. And assuming that all 3 of the original trilogy movies are among my 4, which they are, that would mean that no more than 1 of these 3 films could be considered canon. So which one is it? I'll start by saying that these movies came out during the peak of my Star Wars fandom. Was I excited? You'd better believe it. Was I there at every midnight showing for the whole trilogy? And how? Did I see each movie like I don't even know how many times in theaters? Absolutely. Did I want to love these movies? You betcha. Did I ever purchase this trilogy? No, I did not. I thought that I loved these movies. I had tons of toys, I played the video games, but I never cared to own them because they were all wrong. And I think that the time that they came out in my life plays a significant role in my perspective on this. Because many of you likely cannot remember a time without them. You were never fans of Star Wars at a time when these movies weren't the backstory. This is just what happened. But I encourage you sometime to watch episodes 4, 5, and 6 as though you'd never seen episodes 1, 2, and 3. Pay attention to what they tell you about the past and compare that to the prequel trilogy that we were given. And it might make you wonder if the writers of that trilogy had even seen the original, or if they just heard a few highlights about it from a friend. I will say, the first time I watched A New Hope as an adult, I was angry because the backstory it provided was so much better than the one we were given. And so, for the last week, for the first time in my life, I, along with my children Owen and Penny, have been meticulously studying the first 3 films to uncover every clue that we can find about what should have been in the prequels. But before I get to what they should have been, I want to take a minute to reflect on what they were. I'll start with episode 1, which I think is the best of the trilogy, but also a big part of the reason that everything went sideways. Because episode 1 is not a bad movie. It has great actors, interesting villains, and a compelling story. Fun ships, great battles, too much Jar Jar and midichlorians, but big picture, not a bad film. It just started too early in Anakin's life. We could have had a window into his childhood like we got in Up, but a whole movie dedicated to Anakin as a child for the sake of toys and video games meant that we only had 2 movies left to tell the story of his rise and fall. Which meant that by the next time we saw him, he was already an angsty teenager, not the good man that Obi-Wan had promised. And he continued to get more angsty, arrogant, and self-righteous, then bippity boppity, all of a sudden he was butchering children. It really made his redemption at the end of Return of the Jedi ring hollow. How did one act to save his son redeem him from a lifetime of oppression and murder? I know that there are some people that argue that the Clone Wars fills in the gaps, and that may be true. But if you need almost 44 hours of supplemental material to fill in the holes left by 3 movies totaling less than 7 hours, well gosh, you really botched those 3 movies. And 7 hours is plenty of time to tell a great story. But again, The Phantom Menace was a throwaway in that story arc. So before we go deeper into how the prequel trilogy falls flat, let's take a moment to discuss everything I discovered about what should have been part of this story, based on the clues included in the original trilogy. Okay, I took a lot of notes, and I will be reading them in their entirety in this week's Patreon Extras video. So check out our Patreon if you want to see that, or the host of other great features that we have for our rad fans and stinkin' rad fans on Patreon. But I have since gone through all of those notes, which I took in chronological order, and I have extracted all of the information that could pertain in any way to the past, particularly to how Anakin became Darth Vader. And now I want to go through that with you. Again, pretend that you have never before seen episodes 1, 2, or 3, and just know that this is what we knew had to be part of them. Okay, so there was the Civil War. Rebels from a secret base have just won their first victory. Rebel spies stole plans to the Death Star, and Princess Leia is the custodian of these plans. This is all very important because that actually becomes a movie later. Leia is some sort of royalty on a diplomatic mission to Alderaan. Luke lives with his uncle Owen and Aunt Beru. C-3PO and R2-D2 have been in a lot of action in the rebellion. Many battles. There's someone named Obi-Wan Kenobi. The last master of R2 and C-3PO was someone named Captain Antilles. Ben Kenobi is a hermit that lives beyond the Dune Sea. Beru and Owen know who Obi-Wan is, but they lie to Luke about him. Luke's father was not a farmer, but Owen and Beru knew his father. And they don't want Luke to turn out to be like his father, whoever he was. Ben, when he meets them, doesn't seem to recognize R2-D2. He even says, I don't seem to remember ever owning a droid. And C-3PO and R2, they're unable to respond at that point. Ben seems surprised to hear the name Obi-Wan, but acknowledges, he's me. He hasn't used that name since before Luke. Owen told Luke his father was a navigator on a spice freighter. Ben told him that his father fought in the wars. Owen had different ideals from Luke's father. He thought that Luke's father should have stayed and not gotten involved. Luke's father left to get involved in the wars, which turned out to be the Clone Wars. Ben fought too. He and Luke's father were Jedi Knights. Luke didn't know his father. Luke's father was a great pilot and a cunning warrior and a good friend. His father wanted Luke to have his lightsaber, but Owen wouldn't allow it because he feared that Luke would follow Obi-Wan in an idealistic crusade like his father. This is getting ahead a little bit, but this means that Anakin followed Obi-Wan. The Old Republic was a more civilized age. The Old Republic stood for over 1,000 generations before the Dark Times, before the Empire. Ben is uncomfortable with Luke's question about how his father died. He explains that Darth Vader, a pupil of Ben's before he turned to evil, helped the Empire hunt down and destroy the Jedi Knights. He betrayed and murdered Luke's father. And now the Jedi are all but extinct. Vader, he explains, was seduced by the dark side of the Force. And Luke, when he hears this, seems to be completely unfamiliar with the Force. Ben explains that the Force gives a Jedi his power. It's an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us, penetrates us, binds us all together. At this point in time, the Imperial Senate has just been disbanded. It was the last vestige of something called the Old Republic. And the Death Star is what will prevent any future systems from rising up. Han Solo, he seems to know about the Force, but he doesn't believe in it personally. Grand Moff Tarkin knows who Obi-Wan is, and he teaches us that Obi-Wan is Vader's old master. Vader was the learner when he left Obi-Wan. Now he is the master of evil. And after Obi-Wan is struck down, he disappears completely, though Luke can still hear from him. And that gets us through A New Hope. In The Empire Strikes Back, we learn that Yoda is the Jedi Master who instructed Obi-Wan. Vader's bald head is covered in deep scars. And R2, much like Obi-Wan Kenobi didn't recognize him, he doesn't recognize Yoda. The Emperor, who we see for the first time, clearly outranks Vader. He is his master. Vader knew Luke was a Skywalker, but seems surprised that he is the offspring of Anakin Skywalker. And for some reason, the son of Skywalker could destroy them. Yoda acknowledges that Anakin was a powerful Jedi. Anakin had much anger in him, as did Obi-Wan when Yoda taught him. And Yoda trained Jedi for 800 years. A Jedi must have the deepest commitment, the most serious mind. And Yoda has been watching Luke for a long time. A Jedi does not crave adventure or excitement. Anger, fear, aggression. Those are the dark side of the Force. They flow easily, and they're quick to join you in a fight. The dark path will consume you, as it did Obi-Wan's apprentice, who is Vader. The dark side is quicker, easier, and more seductive, but not stronger. A Jedi is calm, at peace, and passive, and uses the Force for knowledge and defense, but never attack. And then here again is reiterated that life creates the Force, makes it grow. Its energy surrounds us, and binds us. Obi-Wan lost Vader to the Emperor. Vader chose the fast and easy path. Hate leads to the dark side. There is another Skywalker, another future person who could learn the Force, but Obi-Wan might not know about this. Vader reveals that he is Luke's father, and the Force agrees. And that brings us to Return of the Jedi. The Old Republic was free. They're fighting now to restore freedom. Vader is the Emperor's friend, but the Emperor clearly has contempt for him. Darth Vader is indeed Luke's father. A Jedi's strength flows from the Force. Anger, fear, and aggression. This is the dark side. Once you start down the dark path, forever will it dominate your destiny. So it appears, as far as they know, that once you start down that path, there is no return. Vader's mistake was that he underestimated the Emperor's power. Yoda at this point is the last Jedi alive, but he reveals that there is another Skywalker. Obi-Wan explains why he didn't tell Luke the truth about his father's death. His father was seduced by the dark side of the Force. He ceased to be Anakin Skywalker and became Darth Vader. The good man, who was his father, was destroyed. So what he told him was, from a certain point of view, the truth. Anakin was a good friend. When Obi-Wan first knew Anakin, he was already a great pilot, but he was amazed by how strong the Force was with him. Obi-Wan took it upon himself to train Anakin as a Jedi. He thought that he could instruct him just as well as Yoda, which to me means that Yoda would have trained him otherwise. But he was wrong. Vader is now more machine than man, twisted and evil. Luke has a twin sister. To protect them from the Emperor, not Vader, they were hidden from Vader when they were born. The Emperor and Obi-Wan knew that if Anakin were to have offspring, they would be a threat to him. So there doesn't seem to be any ban on marriage or offspring. However, they would be dangerous to the Emperor. Leia is that sister. Leia knows that she had a different real mother who died when she was very young, but she remembers her. She was beautiful, kind, but sad. And Luke can't remember her at all. He never knew her. Leia has the Force with her too, and will learn to use it like Luke. Leia knows by the Force that she's his sister. Obi-Wan, after he had lost Vader, once thought that he could bring Vader back, but the dark side was too strong. Vader even says himself that he must obey his master. The only way not to go to the dark side is not to start the path. The Emperor only needs to get Luke to begin, to strike him down, unarmed, in his anger. This is why he's trying to push Luke into anger by destroying his friends in front of him. And Luke eventually does try to strike down the unarmed Emperor in anger. He's only defended from death by Vader. And so Luke starts down the path. Vader tells him that by giving himself to the dark side, that's the only way that he can save his friends, which makes me wonder if that's what happened to Vader. Vader knows about Luke's sister, possibly only from looking at Luke's thoughts. Obi-Wan was wise to hide her from him. And then Luke attacks Vader. So he attacks. Remember, a Jedi only uses his power for defense, but Luke attacks at the suggestion that Leia would turn to the dark side. Luke, in a rage, cuts off Vader's hand. At this point, looking at his own hand that had been cut off by Darth Vader, he realizes that he has become Vader. He then throws away his weapon and vows never to go to the dark side. He says, "I am a Jedi, like my father before me." Vader then kills the Emperor, sacrificing his own life. He chooses Luke over the Emperor. He is covered in scars. but you can tell that he's a kind man. Luke says, "I've got to save you." And he says, "You already have, Luke." And then a kind old Anakin Skywalker, as a Force ghost, stands by Yoda and Obi-Wan. So those are the clues. All right, let's talk about the story. Anakin Skywalker lives somewhere. Probably not Tatooine if they were hoping to hide Luke from Vader there. Owen Lars, Luke's uncle, is there with him. He's old enough to already be a great pilot before he ever meets Obi-Wan Kenobi, and very much has the Force with him. And this is something that I have to emphasize so strongly. Anakin Skywalker needs to be not only the good man that we were promised, but the best man in all of Star Wars. We need to love him and who he was. Maybe not right from the beginning, but at some point he needs to be that man that we see at the end of Return of the Jedi. I'm talking about the real ending, with Sebastian Shaw as the Force Ghost. An old man, just like Yoda and Obi-Wan, but clearly one of the kindest, best men that we've ever seen. We need to love him so much that when he's redeemed, we weep like babies. Not the petulant child murderer who looks insanely out of place next to those two great Jedi Knights. A good man and a good friend. But we'll get there. He needs to be more the age of Luke in Episode 4. The age of a young man who is ready to join a Jedi Knight on an idealistic crusade. Obi-Wan, who persuades him against Owen's counsel to join him, needs to make the decision to train him instead of Master Yoda. He needs to believe that he can do it just as well. A bit of arrogance, given that Yoda has been at it for the better part of 800 years by this point. And they need to go off and fight in something called the Clone Wars. And I want to start by telling you what this isn't. The Clone Wars isn't the lowest stakes war of all time. A war between robots and rapidly grown clones of a random bounty hunter, where almost nobody who actually has a stake in the fight is doing any of the fighting. Do you know what happens after one side wins in a war between robots and meat photocopies? The people actually impacted by the war's outcome, they begin to fight. So the Clone Wars, which are well known even to a kid from Tatooine who hasn't even heard of the Force, so much so that he would be amazed to hear that you were a part of it, are clearly not that. And while I don't think that what I'm about to say is inescapably what the Clone Wars were, given what is explicitly stated in these movies, I always knew that the Clone Wars were battles between armies of Force-using clones. Jedi armies against Jedi clones, perhaps. Armies of lightsabers running across battlefields in the most intense battle sequences, perhaps that you've ever seen. All in defense of the Old Republic, which has stood as a bastion of freedom and prosperity for 1,000 generations, against the forces of hate and evil. It may be difficult to train a Jedi Knight. That requires the deepest commitment, the most serious mind that is calm, at peace, and passive, and uses the Force for knowledge and defense but never attack. But it is much easier to train hordes of people to embrace anger, fear, and aggression. It is, after all, quicker, easier, and more seductive, if not stronger. These cheap dark side copies of Jedi may not be able to stand up to a Jedi Knight. What about 100 of them? 1,000 of them? These are the Clone Wars of my imagination. So what happened to Anakin? Well, he fell. And not because he was a decent child who became an arrogant teenager and then started butchering children. No, he became a powerful Jedi Knight, a cunning warrior, and a good friend. A good man. Yes, he had anger in him, but so did Obi-Wan when Yoda trained him. But like Obi-Wan, his weakness wasn't his anger, it was his arrogance. Obi-Wan thought he could train Anakin as well as Yoda could. And Anakin underestimated the Emperor's power. Like Luke, he thought that he could face the Emperor and not be drawn to the dark side. In many ways, his story needs to mirror Luke's. The only difference is that Luke did something that seemed impossible to all before. Something Obi-Wan, Yoda, and Vader all thought was impossible. Because Luke started down the path to the dark side. He attacked the Emperor, who was unarmed, with all of his hate, fear, and aggression. From there, all that anyone had ever seen was that the dark side would forever dominate your destiny. But then he turned away. He departed from the path to the dark side. He was strong enough. And Anakin wasn't. At least not yet. But one day he would. After his fall, Obi-Wan needs to try to bring Vader back, but discover that the dark side is too strong. He needs to lose hope, as Anakin, now Vader, helps the Empire to hunt down and destroy all but the last two Jedi Knights. Eventually, all but one, who Luke will kill with his incessant questions. And of course, Anakin needs to somehow, during all of this, have his body battered and destroyed in such a way that he becomes more machine than man, and lose hope himself that he has any ability to do anything other than to obey his master. As for Luke and Leia's mother, one thing that I know is that she doesn't die in childbirth. She is alive and around Leia enough that Leia at least knows her and who she is, though she's very sad. It has long been known that if Anakin had any children, that they would be a threat to the Emperor. So they're hidden from him and from Vader, and they're hidden in very different ways. Leia is hidden relatively in plain sight, a princess on a not inconsequential planet, with her mother to look over her, but a new name. Luke is hidden on a remote world, looked after proximally by his aunt and uncle, but all the while secretly protected by Obi-Wan Kenobi, and watched from a distance by Obi-Wan's master, Yoda, as he resided in exile in Dagobah. With the Old Republic crumbling, and the Jedi, who had protected the galaxy for some 25 to 30,000 years, quickly fading completely from memory. That is what happened. And here are a few things that we know aren't there. Midichlorians. The Force is an energy field created by all living things, not just midichlorians. Life creates the Force and makes it grow. R2-D2 and C-3PO. If they were there, their memories have been wiped, and also Yoda's and Obi-Wan's. Qui-Gon Jinn. Obi-Wan was trained by Yoda. We can still have pod racing. It just happens near the beginning before the 4-minute sequence where Anakin goes from being a little hotshot to a man. And this is why none of the prequel movies are canon. How could they be? So what is the fourth movie? Well, it isn't Solo. Solo isn't a bad movie, but it isn't Han Solo's backstory. So it isn't that one, which leaves only one. The movie that I think might be the best single Star Wars movie ever made, if you don't account for the time in which it was made. The original trilogy is great for now, and unreal for the late 1970s and early 1980s. But without question, Rogue One is the best prequel, and the only other Star Wars movie that I think is even a good prequel or sequel at all. It's a great movie anyway, and it makes you like the original way more. For one thing, it gives you a grittier, more up-close look at the early days of the rebellion. And it gave much deeper meaning to the first few lines of the opening scroll to episode 4. And then brings us right to where the action began in that movie, showing Vader being terrifying in a way that he never was while he was toying with Luke attempting to convert him, not destroy him. The characters were great. It shows that you can have a really great droid character that isn't R2 or C-3PO. And it has an aspect that you really only see in Empire Strikes Back. Little wins that cost the main characters almost everything, or in this case, literally everything. And that is why there are just 4 legitimate Star Wars movies. I'd love to hear your thoughts. As always, like and subscribe. We hope to see you real soon. And may the 4th be with you. My secret hope with this is that Disney might see this and actually make the prequels that we were promised. And then, while you're at it, why not uncover all those legends and make some great sequels?
Will, I guarantee, is going to fall asleep.
No, I
guarantee.
He's going to be bought into this one.
I have to wake up at 6.
Ugh. Why?
I have an appointment for my eyes.
What's wrong with your eyes?
No, it's the LASIK 1 year checkup.
Alright, let's get started.
They put you in a room with a cup. Don't bring him one.
Don't bring.
I thought you needed this.
Yeah. Well, I can't put it back. Just see the look on their face.
Yeah.
If you can. That's a test of your LASIK. What I did, though, is something that the people who wrote the prequel trilogy to Star Wars should have done.
You mean watched them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And paid attention.
Well, I legitimately think that the people who wrote that had heard about Star Wars from a friend. And they're like, that's the gist of it. Write us as a prequel. Make sure there's lots of toys in it.